All right, let's get back into this. Now that we know a little bit about how biology impacts anxiety, let's talk about how anxiety works in the brain. I'm going to get into a little bit of neuropsych nerdy stuff just for a second, so pay close attention. If you get lost, rewind it back and listen to it one more time. I'll try to use some analogies to make it a little bit easier here. So let's talk about the brain structure, just briefly. So at the bottom of our brainstem is a thing called the thalamus. That's where we receive information. And then the thalamus then sends information to where it needs to go. So when we're talking about external stimuli that could potentially create a threat to us, the thalamus is going to send that information to one of two places. First, it could go to the cortex and then to the amygdala, or it could go straight to the amygdala. So let's think of this analogy here. So think of one of those old-time phone operators. Picture that big wall with all of those connections, all of those sort of electrical wires that have to be moved to different spots to be able to have that call go through. All right, so when the information comes in to the thalamus, the call operator, the thalamus is going to send that information to the cortex. It's going to take that wire and say, okay, let's go to the cortex here. So the cortex's job, cortex is kind of like the secretary. So the thalamus, the phone operator, sends that information to the secretary first and says, okay, secretary, here's what's going on. Here's the information I've taken in. The thalamus doesn't make any judgments, just passing that information straight on. So when the cortex, or the secretary, gets that information, it's her job to then sort of think about this in a rational and realistic way. So the cortex is the part of our brain that really works to use ration and reason to solve problems. So when the secretary gets the call, she sort of does a little to the information and says, okay, I've assessed this and here's what I think. This could be a danger. So then she sends it to the amygdala. The amygdala is the big boss. By the time information gets to the big boss, he's running with it. The secretary, the cortex, thinks that that information was important enough to send to the boss. So now it's the amygdala's time, the boss's time, to take action. So on the other hand, sometimes the thalamus, or the call operator, decides, I'm not sending this information to the cortex. It comes so quickly, this is important stuff. I'm just going to take this wire and send it right to the amygdala. And so the amygdala cannot use ration or reason. It doesn't think. It just creates a reaction. So the amygdala is the part of our brain. One of my clients likes to call it the monkey brain, our monkey brain. So our monkey brain goes into action and just starts doing. We talked earlier about the fight, flight, freeze response. And so this is the job of the amygdala. The amygdala triggers our sympathetic nervous system so that we can act. We can move quickly. We can fight if we need to. We can run if we need to. Or we can freeze if that's the best option. And so the amygdala's job, they're just getting things done, right? And so it moves so quickly that even when the secretary is knocking on the door with some information, the amygdala not hearing it. So think about this. Probably if you've experienced anxiety at some time or another, you start thinking, this is so silly. Why am I worried about this? I think I've done this so many times, I've got it. And no matter how many times you reassure yourself and say that using ration and reason, you still feel anxious. Your heart's still beating. You're still sweating. You are still tensed up. That's because the amygdala is in control. So why doesn't the amygdala hear the information that the cortex is trying to tell us? It's trying to tell us, hey, this isn't really a threat. We're not in danger. We don't have to worry about this. Why can't we use our ration and reason to just quiet our anxiety? It's because our amygdala does not have as many receptors to take in that information from the cortex. It can send a lot of information back to the cortex, but once it's going, it can't take in any more information. So when the amygdala gets that information and says it's go time, it activates the sympathetic nervous system, increases respiration, increases heart rate, allows us to fight, flight, or freeze. This makes us safe. So this isn't always a bad thing, right? So we talk again about normal anxiety or helpful anxiety. The amygdala is there, our monkey brain is there from way back when we needed to be scared. We needed to be able to survive and protect ourselves. These days, we probably have a few more protections, and those of us that have that sense of urgency all of the time with anxiety probably are the descendants of people who were on high alert a lot. And it was necessary at that time for survival. Now, though, when you have that amygdala that's constantly sending all of these intense signals to our body, it's hard to focus. It's hard to pay attention to the things that we need to do and do them effectively. So the good news is that we have learned through neuroscience that we can change or even rewire, if you will, our brain. It's using a concept called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity says that we can actually change the feelings that are associated with our memories. So let's say social phobia. We're going to focus on that for just a second. Last time I went out with my friends, I was so nervous. I was ready to cry because I thought, oh, they're making fun of me. They're not going to like me. They're going to think I'm awkward. Next time I get ready to go out with my friends, I'm going to check in on those memories. And those same feelings are going to be elicited. So I'm going to think again and feel those feelings that I did that time before. So again, the good news is that there's this thing called reconsolidation. So when we access memories from the past, like I said, it elicits an emotion. The good thing is, though, when we re-access those memories are in a very malleable state, meaning they can be changed. We can actually start to adjust our memories so that they do not elicit those fearful and anxious emotions that go along with the last time. Simply put, we can work with a therapist to identify some of these negative feelings and change them. All right, so I know that was a lot of information right there, but it's important information. When we start to understand how anxiety works, like I said, we can understand how to treat it. So in the next section, that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at some strategies on how we can treat our anxiety most effectively so that we can live our lives the way that we want.